Arsene Wenger has been asking questions and voicing concerns. But we're going to preface this. UK anti-doping system worse than Russia's, says minister. Now, this is not football, but there's a reason why we're going into this. From the 11th of November 2015, Russian sports minister Vitaly Mutko has said Britain's anti-doping system is even worse than Russia's. A World Anti-Doping Agency Commission report accused Russia of state-sponsored doping and contributing to the sabotaging of London 2012. Mutko said, "We're hearing that medals won by our athletes in London must be taken away, but it's the British system of doping control that operated there." The Department for Culture, Media and Sport said the system was robust. The spokesperson added, "It is highly valued by Britain's sports governing bodies and our clean athletes." Now, that is about basically the whole thing with Russia and the athletics and basically doping. As we mentioned, state-sponsored doping. Now, Arsene Wenger on the same day voiced his concerns over doping in football. Wenger spoke out after Russia were accused of running a state-sponsored doping program by a World Doping Agency, WADA report. WADA chairman Dick Pound, no jokes about the name please, I've already done them, claimed the reports are probably the tip of the iceberg. Dick Pound talking about the tip. Anyway, leaving that aside, and warned athletics is not the only sport with a doping problem. Wenger, who has previously called for blood testing to catch drug cheats, echoed Pound's views and believes many teams his side have faced do not follow the rules. "I try to be faithful to the values that I believe to be important in life and pass them on to others," Wenger said in an interview with L'Equipe. "In 30 years as a manager, I've never had my players injected to make them better. I never gave them any product that would help enhance their performance. I'm proud of that. I've played against many teams that weren't in that frame of mind. For me, the beauty of sport is that everyone wants to win, but there will only be one winner. We've reached an era in which we glorify the winner without looking at the means or the methods." Hold on to that, it's quite an important sentence. "And 10 years later, we realized the guy was a cheat. And during that time, the one that came second suffered. He didn't get recognition, and with all that said about them, they can be very unhappy." Now, 12th of November 2015, Arsene Wenger was actually asked to explain his comments on doping by the Football Association. The FA invited Wenger to provide any further information he may have. Now, midfielder Arsene Ademi tested positive after playing for Dinamo Zagreb in their 2-1 defeat of Arsenal in Zagreb. His B sample at the time was being investigated, but if that is also positive, he could face a ban. The FA said in a statement, the FA in conjunction with the United Kingdom Anti-Doping, UKAD, operates one of the most comprehensive anti-doping testing programs in the world. We have exceptionally few cases of positive tests for performance-enhancing drugs, which reflects the findings from drug testing in football worldwide. All positive cases for WADA prohibited substances are published by UKAD and the FA. Now, fast forwarding a week, Arsene Wenger tells football to wake up to doping threat. This from the 19th of November 2015. Arsene Wenger says football cannot close its eyes to the threat of doping and must introduce more comprehensive testing. He suggested many teams over the years did not share his opposition to doping. Now, what Arsene Wenger has said, he said, to think we in football are just immune because we are football players is absolutely wrong. What I want is deeper tests, better tests, because what we test is superficial. And as well, that when people are caught, that they are punished and the clubs are punished as well. We have to tackle these problems and not close our eyes, because it's a little bit unreasonable to think just because we play football we have no problems with it. Today, when you play away in the Champions League, most of the time we lose 2 hours when there is a doping control because people cannot fulfill the urine test. With a little blood test, it takes a minute and you can test for much more. It's simple. Why can we not do it? And in the other sports, they do it. Now, as said, a Dinamo Zagreb player actually failed a test, and the results of his B sample came back positive too, because Dinamo Zagreb's Arsene Ademi banned for 4 years for failed drugs test. This was on the 20th of November 2015. Following the Champions League win against Arsenal, in which he played the 24-year-old played the full 90 minutes on September 16th, he was actually banned for 4 years. Damien said, I'm not guilty and I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know what to say about this suspension. I feel awful right now. Coach Zoran Mamic said the club will appeal and called it a humiliation. Zoran Mamic told the Zagreb website, Adamian experts proved his supplement was infected with a prohibited substance and he didn't know what kind of supplement he was using. That is why I can't understand this decision made by UEFA. A 4-year suspension is a stupidity. How would UEFA punish Arsenal, Bayern, Manchester or some other big club? We will fight for him and for his case because Ademi is a brilliant young guy, player and vice captain. We want to protect him, protect the club and Croatian football in general because this is a huge stain for all of us. There are no rules to disqualify teams actually from the Champions League unless at least 2 players fail drugs tests. Now, moving on to Monday, 23rd of November 2015, today, Arsene Wenger has accused UEFA of accepting doping weeks after the manager called for improved testing amid claims that teams have flaunted rules in the past. At this time, Arsenal are actually due to play Dinamo Zagreb again. So it's one of them that's very interesting. But it is one of them was their 2-1 defeat earlier in the campaign was marred by a positive test for opposition midfielder Arsene Ademi. UEFA allows a result to stand, and his club have appealed. UEFA allows a result to stand if only one player in the team is caught doping. Wenger has called for, obviously, routine blood tests in the game, as we mentioned. But it's one that was UEFA applies the rule. He said it is a surprising rule. UEFA applies the rule that is planned, but I personally don't agree with the rule. You cannot say, okay, they had a doped player and the result stands. That means you basically accept doping, but it is the rule and we accept that. We have to look at ourselves and deal with our own performance. Gezzie Fizzle, couple questions for you out of that. Firstly, what do you think of UEFA's rule that if one person is doping, then hey, fine, cool, they let the result stand? Secondly, what do you think of Arsene Wenger's assertion that it should be blood testing instead of urine testing? And thirdly, the 4-year ban for Dinamo Zagreb's Arsene Ademi. Do you think that's fair? And do you think that would have happened if he was at a bigger club? And also, I'll throw in another question. How big do you think the problem of doping in football is?
Okay, let's take these in reverse order. The problem with doping in football, I think, is probably a lot bigger than most people care to realize, and that's the reason why Arsene Wenger is bringing it up. Right? So, just to give an example, now I'm not saying this is the case, right? Because I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not the club doctor, and I don't have, access rights and privileges to that kind of information. Just like how certain fans of the show don't have access rights and privileges to interrupt me while I'm talking, right? But you look at somebody like Lionel Messi, who just came back for El Clasico, who was out with, quite a serious injury, and you think, how is he able to get back so quick? If he's flesh, blood, human being like you and me, right? And in most cases, he is, all right? But then, of course, you look at the access to the medical care that he's got, you look at the impact of the sponsorship, you look at the impact of television money, and of course, you look at the public pressure within the game. Where you say, well, look, if it's El Clasico, the biggest and best players in the world have to play in it, they have to be available. Right? Now, is it necessarily scrupulous to say, well, look, it doesn't matter how many drugs we pump him full of, but he's got to play in the game? Not really. Do you have his best interests at heart long term? Not really. You know what I mean? But in terms of the money that's involved, in terms of the prestige of the game, is it for what's best for the league? Is it for what's best for TV? Is it for what's best in the sport? I mean, how many more times will we get to see Cristiano Ronaldo versus Lionel Messi? Not that many, when you really think about it. So, the cost of, injecting them with certain things, if that's to be the case, when you think about it versus what, everybody's in line to be paid, it's actually quite small. If you're looking at money being, a comforting factor. So yeah, I think it's probably a lot bigger than what we think it is. There just hasn't been many high-profile cases to really expose it. But just because there's a lack of high-profile cases doesn't mean it doesn't happen behind closed doors.
Yeah, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean the whole world's not against you.
That's it. Right? So the other question was about the ban, right? Do I think he would have been banned if he was playing for a higher profile club? Maybe, maybe not. Right? So we look at Rio Ferdinand's ban for missing his drug test. Right? And that was missing a drug test, not for failing a drug test. He got a sizable ban.
Well, that was 9 months. So you compare that to 4 years.
No, I know, but I'm saying that, you know, he missed a drug test. He got 9 months, which is what, the equivalent of most of the season anyway. Right? So you say, well, probably. You know, it can't be one of those one rule for, you know, the smaller clubs and another rule for the clubs that happen to wield a lot of power in the footballing world. No, it has to be a uniform rule, and everybody has to be punished uniformly and in a draconian fashion, as someone I know would say very often.
Damn, hit my scripted ad-lib.
That's just how it's got to go. It's as simple as that.
But the thing is, it doesn't always go like that, because you look at, say, you look at Yap Stam. Yap Stam tested positive for nandrolone back in 2002. He only got 5 months. He got a 5-month ban for testing positive for the banned steroid nandrolone. He got 5 months. See,
no, I know,
you see where I'm going with this.
Was it in something else, and was it trace elements? I mean, I don't remember the full ins and outs of that case. We'd have to probably go on interwebs and dig them up and look at it in greater detail, or something for us to look into in terms of the future of the game, so on and so forth, right? But what I will also say is this, right? We're talking about the rule where one player is found, you know, doping or having failed the test and everything, it's cool, etc., etc. This is the part where I happen to disagree with the rule, right? I say if any player is found to be doping, look, the whole team has to suffer. The only way that you're going to go and stamp this out, as I said previously, and I know you will agree with me, is where the punishment is uniform and draconian in fashion, right? Therefore, any player caught, the team suffers. The team gets banned. The team can't compete in league or European competition, depending on when it was found, right? If you punish teams like that, that gets stamped out real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. So I'm an advocate of that personally. You know, and I think the current rule, you know, much like Arsene Wenger said, it's kind of like, well, if you're saying that that's okay, then really it is an endorsement, as long as it's just one player. Right? So then you might as well say, well, hey, let's have one player on the juice for every game, right? Can't be any worse than that. And then it's like, well, if you've got one player on the juice, then as long as you keep changing the player, doesn't matter. Not really. And then you say, well, is that the right message to send out? Not at all.
But for me, you know, I do agree with what you're saying. At the end of the day, you punish uniformly, you punish in a draconian fashion, and people will quickly get their acts together. Which is what frustrates me entirely about financial fair play, because it's one of them ones. It looked like something good, and they went and boiled it down, which we were saving for a future PT show, the full discussion on that. And it's one of them ones now, it's just wishy-washy, and I don't think anybody really gives much of a damn. But the fact of the matter, for me, in terms of Wenger's comments, like you said, Jesse, I think Arsene Wenger's right. In terms of doping in football, I think it almost certainly happens. You can't, because, and the reason why I reckon doping in football not only happens but is rife throughout the game is purely on the basis of, look how unscrupulous football is as a sport. Everybody is looking for an advantage over their opponents. Everybody, no matter who you are at pro level, especially in the top leagues. Like, so we're talking Champions League, we're talking La Liga, we're talking Premier League, we're talking Serie A, we're talking Eredivisie, Bundesliga, Brasileirão, throw them in too. It's a case of, when you're looking at the top leagues, there are such fine margins between victory and defeat. There are millions of pounds riding on thousands to millions of pounds riding on positions, riding on cup wins. There are billions of pounds riding on television deals, and everybody wants a slice of that pie. And how much you get from those deals is basically divided up based on your league position in England. So when you're factoring all those things in, when you're looking at stuff like diving, which is cheating, and how rife things like diving are, just to get an advantage for your team, doping has to be rife, because it's another way of giving your player, which actually directly gives your team an advantage, which is where I think Arsene Wenger in part was going, in terms of him mentioning other teams might not have been in the same mindset of keeping their players clean. I mean, for me, a little bit of the argument from Arsene Wenger does kind of get taken away a touch, because he almost kind of indirectly infers that because of that midfielder doping, his team lost. Okay, we'll leave that aside, but I thought I'd mention it, we're just purely playing DA, devil's advocate. But the fact of the matter is, looking at how unscrupulous football is as a sport, I mean, just look at Suarez going to Barca, for pure instance. As much as people were chastising the guy, saying, "Oh, he's bitten someone again," damn, it's like one of them was Liverpool should fire him. Da da da. Like I said at that time, if Liverpool were to have fired him, then teams would have been lined up round the block to take him on. That's how unscrupulous a sport football is. I mean, look at the kids at Leicester City with that racist sex tape thing. I think all of them ended up finding clubs within a couple months. But if it wasn't for a parasitic media and social media backlash, Ched Evans might have found the club would have found the club straight away. So you see where I'm going with this? It's a case of that is how unscrupulous as a sport football is, and the powers that be, people running clubs. I mean, if you want any more of an example of how unscrupulous football is as a sport, just look at Massimo Cellino, 2-time convicted fraudster, still passes the fit and proper persons test. What? That doesn't even make sense. Thaksin Shinawatra got indicted on corruption charges back to Thailand. How did he end up taking the club in the first place? See, it's one of them ones. I mean, this whole thing, it hurts me to say it, but football is so unscrupulous as a sport. It's so unscrupulous as a sport. It wouldn't surprise me if doping was rife throughout the game. It's just the fact that only a couple of people throughout history have been made an example of. And I said, like with the Yap Stam example, he got 5 months for testing for a banned steroid. He got 5 months for that. And then Rio Ferdinand gets longer for missing a drug test. That doesn't even make sense. Something doesn't compute. I'm not really a fan of Rio Ferdinand in terms of public persona anyway. But anyway, it is one of them ones where I said, I think Wenger's right. You can't close your eyes to this. And as you said so eloquently, Gezzie, it is one of them ones where it's like, oh, if one player tests positive for something, no, that's fine, cool. We're not going to chuck your team out for that. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, okay, so you're indirectly actually endorsing it, because you're saying, hey, as long as it's only one player, then it's cool. So what about if there's racist abuse going on at a club? If it's only one player doing it, then it's fine. Because see, this logic can spill into other things as well, and it sets a dangerous precedent. It really does set a dangerous precedent. So I don't know. The powers that be really do need to buck up their ideas on this. And this is the thing. And one other thing that this whole thing kind of reminded me of, especially with the Russia thing coming up. There was a case, I think about 2-3 years ago, where a Spanish judge ordered a load of blood bags to be destroyed. And there was a trial about a load of sportsmen testing positive for banned substances, a range of banned substances, but those blood bags were ordered, and samples and that were ordered to be destroyed. So we'll never know whose samples were in there. But apparently there were footballer samples involved in that as well. So when you've got that kind of thing happening, which looks like a cover-up, and you've got certain unscrupulous managers or unscrupulous chairmen who will win at any cost, and the footballing world being so cutthroat and unscrupulous, it would surprise me if doping was not rife. It legitimately would. I mean, we've heard the kind of folk legends about Lionel Messi in his teenage years being pumped full of human growth hormone. Heard those stories before. Don't know if they were true. But we've always heard those stories going around. Those pain-killing injections. What's in those? That's how unscrupulous football as a sport is. It's like, oh, you're in pain. Here you go. Here's an injection. How do you know they're not putting extra stuff in that? Extra stuff that might not be detected. That might let's say for instance, steroid derivatives. So it's one of them ones that there might be ways around certain tests. You may be able to, for instance, pay an outside entity to only find certain types of steroids, or not find other substances. So it's a case of how robust is the testing. So there's questions to be asked about this. There legitimately are questions to be asked about this, and I think the FA asking Wenger to clarify what he said, and if you got more information, give it to us. I think the FA are really trying to cover their own backs, and FIFA and UEFA are probably too busy with their own crap storm. We had a load on that last week and the week before. They're probably too busy with their own crap storm to really be too focused on that right now. But it needs to be focused on. All right. I mean, Ryan Sonley, did you want to jump in on the doping issue in football?
Yeah, well, I think it's, in a way, I don't think any drug should be allowed in football, because obviously, if there's reasons for having drug tests, so why let dope into football when it's a drug?
Well, no. Well, it's not. Well, it's not talking. It's not specifically talking about dope / weed. It's about stuff like steroids and derivatives of steroids. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess that, but still, I wouldn't. Any illegal drug shouldn't be allowed. Only drugs that are prescribed by a doctor should be allowed to be used. There's drug tests. I mean, the Football League and the Premiership obviously do regular drug tests on players. I mean, and they should ban all drugs, not just a certain few.
But then the thing is, though, there is in terms of what you just said, there is kind of a loophole in there. I mean, drugs prescribed to you by a doctor, there's a huge loophole in there, and that loophole just reminded me of Gezzie Fizzle and Brad Hicks. You guys might remember this as well, but when the Benoit tragedy happened, there was a place called Signature Pharmacy. I don't know if there was a place called Signature Pharmacy where it emerged that a lot of pro wrestlers were getting their stuff prescribed from a certain doctor at Signature Pharmacy, a legitimate doctor, but instead of prescribing drugs that some kind of like steroids and stuff like that someone would need for recovery, they wouldn't get prescribed a week's worth. they would be getting prescribed 6, 7, 8 months worth at once. So a doctor prescribing you your drugs is not necessarily a guarantee that everything will be above board. So
no, I understand that point. And you know, I think the other thing to look at is all of the controversy at the moment surrounding athletics.
Yeah, that's why right? I had to preface that point with Russell.
And I know that's where the whole story essentially comes from, right? But now athletics is deeply mired in controversy, right? Because there have been numerous cases of athletes that have, you know, failed drug tests and so on and so forth, that have won medals, or you know, eventually had those, I suppose, rescinded, for lack of a better term, and that's a huge problem. And honestly, I don't see athletics digging itself out of this hole anytime soon. Like, yes, you have a couple of athletes who, you know, are proudly not taking any drugs and haven't taken any drugs, so on and so forth. And then you have the ones who did. And like Arsene Wenger said, the ones who didn't win, they got lauded. The ones who didn't and came second or maybe third, nobody really talks about them because they didn't win. Right? And now all of that is brought into disrepute. So I think in light of this, right, I think all sports, not just football, not just athletics, but all sport, full stop, really does have to look into this. And I think you're right about the loophole. Just because a club doctor says it's okay, does that mean it's okay? Not necessarily. The club doctor, as I say, might not have that particular individual or the club's best interests in mind when they're prescribing certain drugs. Right? For all you know, these doctors might be working for the same pharmaceutical companies that they're pushing the drugs from.
Exactly. There we go.
Right? But I'm not going to get too deep into any of that stuff. I'm just going to say to you that right about now, if football continues to close its eyes, right, when you look at what's happening in other major sports. So, for example, we'll just briefly touch on boxing, and we'll talk about one of the biggest fights in boxing history in Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. One of the reasons why that fight took so long to get put together was about drug testing.
Yeah, because Pacquiao failed a couple, one or two, didn't he? Drug tests.
Right. And then, of course, as I say, you look at athletics now, and you have so many different drug cheats in athletics. I could probably sit here for the length of the show naming all of the people that have had drug issues in athletics, right? So if it's going to continue to, and of course mixed martial arts or MMA, specifically in the UFC and Bellator, there's been several high profile athletes that have taken hormone replacement therapy, other drugs including steroids, that have now marred the credibility of that sport as well, right? So to ignore the fact that this is going on across sport and not to have a stringent program in place, to me is ignorant, right? And I look at the FA and I say, okay, you know, there's a big accusation here, but this is also a huge opportunity to step up to the plate. What are you going to do? What kind of regulations, what kind of guidelines are you going to put in place to ensure that, you know, the sport is as clean as it can be? Right? If it is urine testing and drug testing, or, you know, blood testing and urine testing for drug tests, or whether it's just blood tests outright, right? Whatever it is that you want to do, but have something in place. Right? Because imagine it came out, let's say, for example, a high profile Manchester United player was known to have taken drugs on a regular basis when Manchester United were winning all those league titles. All those league titles now have a nasty stain on them all. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing like when, you know, it was now public knowledge that Diego Maradona took cocaine on a regular basis. Right? It was like, yes, cocaine is a hell of a drug, and if you got that reference, well done to you. But at the same time, you know, you also have to say, what could he have done? What would he have done if he wasn't cocaine? And why couldn't he have got help sooner? Right? Because here's the other part of this that we're not talking about. Yes, you know, football is a global sport, and in the top leagues in the world, we're talking about, you know, television deals, media deals that are worth billions. But what about the individuals themselves? Right? So you have to put this in place to help them, to help maintain the sport. Otherwise, you know, we're looking at a similar controversy to that of athletics, if not worse, because there's so much money and fame involved. And I don't know if football will be able to recover.
I mean, that's it. I mean, this is the scary thing for me. For me personally, as a lover of football, as a supporter of football, as a player, it's concerning that all of this scandal is happening. I'm glad Wenger is speaking out. But similar to what Jim Cornette has said about the wrestling business, he said on his U shoot back in, I think it was 2011. Cornette said on his Kayfabe Commentaries U shoot that, you know what, it is one of them, and he also said it on his Wrestle Talk TV tour too. He said that wrestling couldn't afford a lot more bad publicity considering what's happened over the past 5-10 years. I think football's kind of the same, in that football really can't afford a lot more negative publicity, because like I've said to certain Chelsea fans, it's a case of negative PR is never a good thing, and nobody wants negative PR, because once you're tarnished with a certain brush, dependent on which brush it is, you ain't getting that stain off. So like it's one of them ones. You do not want your sport tarnished with the brush of everyone's just taking performance enhancing drugs, no one's honest. You don't want that. I mean, football, we've already got that with the FIFA scandal. We've already got that with that disgrace of a scandal where people are thinking, well, oh, okay, plus match fixing. There's a lot of good in football, but there's a lot of bad as well, which we've gone over on shows over the years. I mean, there's the FIFA corruption scandal. There's match fixing. There's this potential doping thing as well. And it's like, can't afford a lot more negative publicity. So, hey, we will come back to this another time, definitely. Almost certainly we'll come back to this another time.
Most definitely, because we're not done here. Not on this topic. We ain't done by a long shot.
Yeah, exactly. You sound like Steve Austin in '98. I improve with you, Vince. I improve with you, not yet by a long shot.
Well done on getting that OWR.
Oh yeah, I love it, man. Man 316 says I just peed my pants. So it's one of them.